No one in Maplewood Lane knew what their HOA president was capable of until it was too late. On the surface, Evelyn Mercer looked like the ideal suburban leader, elegant, organized, and always smiling. She waved at everyone during her morning walks, held charity bake sales, and talked about community pride as if she had built the neighborhood herself. But behind those polite smiles and manicured hedges was something much darker, something that had been festering ever since her late husband's death 3 years earlier. Across the street lived Daniel Reyes, a quiet man in his early 30s who'd moved in just 6 months ago. A contractor by trade, Daniel had bought one of the older homes on the block and was slowly fixing it up, repainting the porch, replacing the gutters, and trimming back years of neglect. To Evelyn, his renovations were unsightly disruptions to the neighborhood's charm. But there was something else about Daniel that bothered her more than the noise or the dust. People liked him. Within weeks, neighbors were asking him for advice about repairs instead of calling the HOA office. He became the friendly face Evelyn no longer was, and that, in her mind, was unforgivable. One humid evening in June, Daniel sat on his porch sipping a beer, watching the sunset fade into a pale orange glow. Across the street, Evelyn's blinds shifted ever so slightly. She had been watching him for nearly 10 minutes, her mind spinning in quiet calculation. That night, as the cicadas buzzed and porch lights flickered, a crash echoed down Maplewood Lane. The next morning, neighbors found the Mercer community sign smashed into pieces, the HOA's pride and symbol gone, and the president was furious. At 9 a.m., Evelyn stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by residents. "This isn't just vandalism," she declared, her voice trembling with moral outrage. "This is an attack on our community values." Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed squarely on Daniel. "Maybe," she said softly, "someone new around here doesn't understand what we stand for." A hush fell. Daniel blinked, confused. "Are you talking about me?" Evelyn tilted her head, sympathetic but sharp. "You were up late last night, weren't you? I heard some kind of machinery around midnight." Daniel frowned. "I was in bed by 11. But the seed had been planted." 2 days later, an anonymous tip was sent to the HOA board's private email. A witness saw Daniel Reyes near the community sign that night, carrying tools. Within hours, Evelyn called an emergency board meeting. Inside her immaculate living room, the board members, 3 older residents who trusted her completely, listened as she displayed a series of evidence. Security camera stills from her own property showed a blurred figure walking down the sidewalk at night. The shape was indistinct, but Evelyn zoomed in just enough to suggest it could be Daniel. "He's the only one doing construction in the area," she said, voice low but firm. "He has the tools, the motive. He's been disrespecting HOA codes since he moved in." The others nodded, hesitant but persuaded. When Daniel received the notice of violation the next morning, accusing him of intentional property damage and demanding $3,500 in restitution, he was stunned. He went straight to Evelyn's door. She opened it with that same practiced smile. "Daniel," she said sweetly, "what a surprise." "You think I broke your stupid sign," he snapped. "I had nothing to do with that." Evelyn's tone was calm, almost patronizing. "You don't have to raise your voice, we just need to resolve this peacefully. If you pay the damages, we'll forget the whole thing." Daniel laughed incredulously. "You're out of your mind, I'm not paying for something I didn't do." Her expression hardened. "Then I suppose we'll have to escalate this." She closed the door, and that was the moment Daniel realized this wasn't just about a sign. She wanted him gone. Over the next week, small things began to happen around his house. Trash bags appeared on his lawn overnight. His mailbox was dented. One morning, he woke up to find a letter taped to his door: "Some people don't belong here." He showed the messages to the local deputy, but the officer just shrugged. "Unless you catch someone in the act, there's not much we can do." Evelyn, meanwhile, continued to play the perfect president, comforting concerned neighbors, holding extra meetings, and quietly gathering more evidence. Then came the storm. One night, thunder rolled across the sky and rain lashed the street like shards of glass. Daniel heard a loud bang outside, something hitting his garage. When he ran out with a flashlight, he saw it. The HOA storage shed across the street had collapsed and the metal panels were scattered across the road. A few minutes later, Evelyn's voice pierced the storm. "Daniel, what have you done?" She stood under an umbrella, flanked by 2 board members, pointing at the debris like it was a murder scene. Before Daniel could explain, she was already dialing her phone. "Hello, police? Yes, I'm reporting deliberate property damage. I saw him do it with my own eyes." He froze, realizing how impossible this looked. His tools were lying in his open truck bed. He'd been repairing his fence earlier that day. When the patrol car arrived, the rain hadn't stopped. Officer Trent, a local cop who knew Evelyn well, stepped out frowning. "Evening, Daniel, we've had a report." "She's lying," Daniel said immediately. "That shed fell on its own. It's been unstable for months." Evelyn gasped, shaking her head. "He's been harassing me for weeks. I told you all this would happen." Officer Trent sighed. "Let's all calm down." But by then, the neighbors were already peeking through curtains, watching the scene unfold. In their eyes, Daniel wasn't the friendly handyman anymore. He was the troublemaker Evelyn had warned them about. Over the next few days, gossip spread like wildfire. The HOA filed an official complaint. Daniel's reputation sank. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, someone vandalized his own property. His fence was smashed and red paint was sprayed across his garage. "Pay what you owe." Daniel's patience broke. He set up his own security cameras, determined to catch whoever was doing this. But what he didn't know was that Evelyn was watching too and planning her final move. Late one night, around 2:30 a.m., Evelyn snuck out of her house wearing gloves and a raincoat. She crept across the street toward Daniel's front yard, carrying a crowbar and a bucket of paint. Her hands trembled not from fear but from exhilaration. She smashed one of his porch lights, then poured paint across his walkway. "Let's see how you explain this," she whispered, smirking. Then she dropped one of Daniel's old tools near the mess, one she'd stolen from his backyard days ago, and slipped back home before sunrise. The next morning, Daniel woke up to flashing lights again. Someone had called the police before he even saw the damage. Officer Trent was back, and this time he wasn't alone. "Mr. Reyes," he said sternly, "we've received another report. The HOA says you vandalized your own property to make the president look bad." Daniel's jaw dropped. "That's insane." Evelyn stood across the street, arms crossed, eyes glistening with false concern. "I just want peace," she said softly. The officer sighed. "We'll need you to come down to the station to clear this up." Daniel clenched his fists but nodded, knowing resistance would only make it worse. At the station, he told his side of the story over and over, but with no proof and Evelyn's spotless reputation, the case seemed hopeless. The HOA had even provided a witness statement from one of Evelyn's board members, claiming they saw Daniel near the shed the night it fell. By the time Daniel returned home, his stomach was twisted in knots. His security cameras had been running all night, but when he checked the footage, he found the files corrupted. The power had cut out around 2:20 a.m. Evelyn had planned for everything. For the next few days, he kept his head down, but the tension in the neighborhood was unbearable. Neighbors avoided him. Children stopped waving. He'd become an outcast in the very place he'd hoped to build a life. And yet one small thing gave him hope. A few houses down, an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Parker approached him one afternoon. Her voice was shaky, but her eyes sharp. "I don't know what Evelyn's telling everyone," she said, "but I saw her outside last night, around 2:30. She was wearing a raincoat." Daniel froze. "Are you sure?" Mrs. Parker nodded. "I couldn't sleep. My curtains were open. I saw her walking toward your house." That was all he needed. He thanked her and went straight to his computer. Even though his footage had been corrupted, the camera had backed up metadata, timestamps of motion detected during the blackout. At 2:28 a.m., the motion detector triggered, exactly when Mrs. Parker said she saw Evelyn. Daniel smiled bitterly. "Got you." That night, as rain returned to Maplewood Lane, Daniel began setting his trap quietly, carefully, methodically. If Evelyn wanted to destroy him, he was going to make sure she fell into her own lie. But he didn't know just how far she was willing to go to protect her secret. Because Evelyn Mercer wasn't just hiding petty malice, she was hiding something far worse. Something that would turn this quiet neighborhood into a crime scene. The rain returned to Maplewood Lane like a warning. Soft at first, then heavier, relentless, washing the streets clean while something far dirtier began to unfold. Inside his dimly lit kitchen, Daniel sat at his table, laptop open, rainwater dripping from his sleeves. The faint glow of the screen reflected in his tired eyes. On it, lines of code and timestamps scrolled past. He wasn't a tech expert, but desperation had made him inventive. The corrupted camera footage still held fragments, snippets of frames, noise, digital static, but underneath a glimmer of movement appeared. A shape, a figure. It wasn't enough to prove anything yet, but it was something. He leaned back, whispering to himself, "I just need her to do it again." Across the street, Evelyn Mercer stood before her mirror, brushing her silver blonde hair into a perfect wave. Her reflection smiled back, cold, satisfied. The neighborhood believed her now. Daniel was the troublemaker, the vandal, the liar. She had won. Or so she thought. On her dresser lay a stack of envelopes, HOA violation notices, new fines, and a formal demand for payment. The next one she planned would be the final blow. Once Daniel defaulted on his fees, she'd petition for foreclosure. One more letter and he'd be gone for good. But what Evelyn didn't know was that Daniel had already started watching her closely. 2 nights later, the storm came back stronger. Daniel sat in his truck, parked a few houses down, waiting. He had borrowed a new set of cameras, hidden, motion-activated, this time with backup batteries. One pointed at Evelyn's driveway, another at his front yard, and one more, the most important, hidden beneath his porch light. It was almost midnight when a shadow moved across the street. Evelyn, wearing that same raincoat, the same gloves. Her posture was quick and deliberate. She looked both ways, clutching a bag. Inside it, Daniel knew, would be the props of her deception: paint, tools, maybe something worse. She stepped into his yard, careful not to slip on the wet pavement, and pulled out what looked like another metal rod. Her breath came out in quick bursts, then crash. The sound of shattering glass echoed faintly as she struck one of his porch lamps again. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He could feel his pulse thudding in his ears, but he didn't move, not yet. Through the rain, Evelyn bent down, placing something near the steps, another of his stolen tools, one she'd taken weeks ago. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle of solvent, splashing it against his wall. The sharp smell cut through the storm. And then, as if on cue, she looked around and smiled. The camera caught everything. That was all Daniel needed. But he didn't go out there. He wanted her to think she'd gotten away with it. He wanted her to feel safe. Because tomorrow, he planned to expose her publicly. The next morning, Maplewood Lane was alive with whispers. Evelyn had gathered the HOA board at her house, triumphant. On her coffee table sat a set of printed photos: the fresh damage at Daniel's home, the broken light, the streaks of solvent that looked like vandalism. "I'm afraid it's escalating," she said gravely. "He's trying to frame me now. I can't let this continue." The board members, Walter, June, and Lisa, exchanged uneasy looks. Evelyn's voice was trembling with feigned exhaustion. "I think it's time we involve the authorities at a higher level," she said. "Maybe even file a restraining order for everyone's safety." "Are you sure he's capable of that?" Lisa asked softly. Evelyn's lips curved into a sad smile. Sometimes the nicest faces hide the darkest anger. Just as she spoke, her doorbell rang. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, raincoat dripping, holding a small flash drive in one hand. His face was calm, almost too calm. "I think you'll want to see this," he said. Evelyn froze. "What is that?" "Proof," Daniel replied. "Proof that I'm not the one doing this." The board members looked between them, confused. Walter frowned. "Maybe we should." But Evelyn cut him off. "No. We don't need to see whatever." Daniel's voice rose. "Scared of the truth, Evelyn?" For a split second her mask slipped, her jaw tightened, then with forced composure she said, "Fine, show us." They all gathered around her television as Daniel plugged in the drive. The video began, grainy but clear enough. Evelyn's front yard, the rain. A figure in a raincoat stepping across the street. The camera zoomed in, and though the hood covered her hair, the shape of her face, her height, her walk, unmistakable. When the light shattered in the video, Evelyn's eyes went wide. Daniel pressed pause. "That's you," he said quietly. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Walter turned slowly. "Evelyn, what is this?" Her voice shook. That's not me, that's been edited. Daniel smirked. Go ahead and deny it. There's another camera too, the one behind my porch light caught your face perfectly when you turned around. Her composure cracked just slightly, but enough for everyone to see it. June gasped. Lisa covered her mouth. Evelyn, June whispered, tell us this isn't true. Evelyn's hands trembled. Her perfect image, years of control, was collapsing, but she wasn't done yet. Her mind moved fast, desperate. He's framing me, she snapped. Don't you see, he set this up, he's manipulating all of you. Daniel leaned closer. The metadata doesn't lie, Evelyn. The timestamp matches the police report you filed, 2:32 a.m., right when you said you saw me. He pulled out a folder, dropping printed data onto the table. And there's more. I checked the community storage shed you said I destroyed. The nails were rusted through, Evelyn. The storm would have taken it down eventually, you knew that, but you needed someone to blame. Evelyn's breath came in shallow bursts. You think anyone will believe a contractor over the HOA president? But Walter's voice cut through. I think the police will. That afternoon, the neighborhood that once worshipped Evelyn began to turn. Whispers rippled through Maplewood Lane that the beloved president might not be who she seemed. Daniel sent copies of his footage to the local authorities and attached Mrs. Parker's written statement. He didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, 2 officers showed up at Evelyn's home. Mrs. Mercer, one said, we have a few questions about the recent property damage incidents. Her smile returned, brittle and rehearsed. Of course, officers, come in. Inside, her house was immaculate, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she poured coffee. She'd rehearsed what to say, how to appear cooperative, but when they showed her still images from Daniel's footage, her throat tightened. The resemblance was undeniable. We're not making accusations yet, one officer said, but if you could tell us where you were that night. Evelyn interrupted sharply. This is ridiculous, I was asleep. The officers exchanged a glance. Then you won't mind if we review your home security footage for that night. For the first time, Evelyn faltered. Her own footage had been wiped by her weeks ago. Her silence was all the answer they needed. Mrs. Mercer, the officer said carefully, we're going to ask you to come with us for some questions downtown. As they led her toward the door, her eyes met Daniel's from across the street. He stood there, arms folded, expression unreadable. For a moment he thought it was over. But he was wrong. Because as Evelyn sat in that interrogation room, her mask began to slip completely, revealing something Daniel had never imagined. Something that explained why she hated him so much. The detective slid the photo of the vandalized shed across the table. You've been HOA president for 10 years, Mrs. Mercer. You're known for being meticulous. Why risk everything for this? Her eyes flickered, then hardened. He didn't belong here. Because he moved in without your approval. No, she whispered, because that house, his house, should have been mine. The detective frowned. Yours. Her voice dropped to a bitter murmur. My husband built that home before he died. He was renovating it for us. Then after he passed, the bank sold it. Daniel bought it. He didn't even know. Tears welled, not of guilt but fury. He's living in my house, sleeping in the bedroom that was meant for me, and he tears it apart like it's nothing, painting over what he didn't build. He took everything from me. Her voice cracked into something dark. I just wanted him gone. The room fell silent. The detective leaned back, exhaling slowly. Mrs. Mercer, you understand how serious this is. But Evelyn didn't answer. She was staring past him at the wall as if the truth she'd buried had finally turned on her. By evening, the police obtained a warrant. They searched her home and found the gloves, the paint bottles, the stolen tools marked with Daniel's initials. The case was undeniable. As the news broke, neighbors lined the sidewalks, watching in stunned silence as Evelyn Mercer, their once beloved HOA president, was led away in handcuffs. Daniel stood by his mailbox, watching the flashing lights fade into the distance. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight lift from his chest. But victory didn't feel like he thought it would. Because under all the anger, there was something else: pity. Evelyn wasn't just cruel, she was broken. And he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. Because that night, as he walked back inside, his phone buzzed with a new notification, an anonymous email, no subject, no sender. When he opened it, there was only one line of text. "You think she acted alone?" His heart sank. Outside, across the street, Evelyn's house was dark, but the upstairs curtain moved. The message burned in Daniel's mind like a ghost that refused to leave. "You think she acted alone?" He stared at the words on his screen long after midnight, replaying everything in his head, every smirk, every whisper, every signature on those HOA notices. Evelyn might have been the ringleader, but someone had helped her. Someone who knew how to cover tracks, falsify emails, wipe footage. She hadn't done all of that alone. The rain had stopped, but the night outside his window felt heavier than before. Maplewood Lane was silent, too silent. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes, took a breath, and clicked reply. "Who are you? What do you mean?" No response, just the soft hum of his computer and the slow creak of the wind through the trees. He shut the laptop, but sleep didn't come. His thoughts kept circling back to the HOA board. There had been 3 members under Evelyn, Walter, June, and Lisa. They'd believed everything she said, never questioned her, never checked her evidence. But one of them had sent that email. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Evelyn Mercer's arrest had hit the local paper. HOA president charged with false accusation and property damage. People whispered in driveways, avoiding Daniel's eyes. Some offered awkward smiles of apology, others looked away. Only one person came to his door, Lisa Harrow, the youngest board member, early 40s, always polite, always quiet during meetings. She stood there holding a cup of coffee and a manila envelope. "I thought you might want this," she said softly. "It's from Evelyn's office files. The police didn't take everything." Daniel frowned. "Why give it to me?" "Because there's something you need to see." He let her in. She laid the envelope on his kitchen table and slid it open. Inside were photocopies of HOA correspondence, emails, invoices, inspection forms, but one in particular caught his attention, an invoice for security camera maintenance, dated 3 days before the first vandalism incident. The company name was fake, the phone number disconnected. Daniel looked up. "You're saying she had someone tamper with my footage?" Lisa nodded slowly. Evelyn wasn't good with technology, someone helped her. He leaned back. "Who?" She hesitated. "Walter, her vice president." Daniel remembered Walter, stern, retired engineer, always standing behind Evelyn like her shadow. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Lisa's voice dropped. "He handled all the HOA's finances and security systems. Evelyn trusted him with everything. I think he's the one who wiped your footage." Daniel exhaled. "Then why hasn't he been questioned?" "Because," she whispered, "Evelyn's taking the fall alone. She told the police she acted on impulse, that she forged everything herself, but that's not true. Walter was in on it." The weight of it hit Daniel like a second storm. The thought that this wasn't over, that someone else in power had been quietly pulling strings, made his stomach twist. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. Lisa's eyes darted to the window. "Because I'm scared. I got an anonymous message last night, same as you." He froze. "What did it say?" She swallowed. "You're next." That night, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards made his chest tighten. At 10:47 p.m., his motion sensor pinged, the one facing the street. He opened the live feed. A car idled 2 houses down, lights off, engine humming. He zoomed in, the license plate half covered with mud. The silhouette in the driver's seat didn't move. He watched for 5 long minutes before the car rolled away, disappearing into the dark. He knew who it was. Walter. The next day, Daniel went to the police station. Officer Trent met him at the desk, looking weary. "Mr. Reyes, I heard about the email. You think someone's still targeting you?" Daniel showed him the envelope and Lisa's message. Evelyn had help, her vice president, Walter Green. He had access to all the neighborhood security systems. Trent frowned. "We already checked Evelyn's statement. She says she acted alone." "Because she's protecting him," Daniel said. "He's been covering her tracks for months." The officer sighed. "You've been through hell, Daniel, but without solid evidence, there's not much." "I'll get it," Daniel interrupted. His voice was steady, colder than before. "Just promise me when I do, you'll act." Trent nodded slowly. You get me proof, I'll move. That evening, Daniel visited Lisa again. Her house was dimly lit, curtains drawn. She looked nervous when she opened the door. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. If Walter's watching. Then let him, Daniel said. We end this tonight. Together, they dug through more of Evelyn's records. There, a series of digital transfers from the HOA fund to a company under Walter's name. Small amounts spread out over months. Payments labeled community maintenance, equipment testing, lighting upgrades. But the final transfer, just days before Evelyn's arrest, stood out. $12,000 labeled legal contingency. Daniel's brow furrowed. Legal contingency for what? Lisa's voice trembled. She knew she was going to get caught. They planned for it. Daniel looked up. You means? She was the distraction, Lisa said. Walter been cleaning up something else entirely. A long pause hung between them. What if this was never about me? Daniel muttered. What if Evelyn framed me to hide whatever he was doing? That night, as lightning flashed over Maplewood Lane again, Daniel broke into the HOA's storage shed, the same one Evelyn had accused him of damaging. Inside, it smelled of rust and mildew, old chairs, broken signs, filing boxes. But behind a false panel near the floor, he found something else, a locked metal case with HOA stamps. He pried it open. Inside were stacks of unrecorded checks, blank permits, and digital storage drives. He plugged one into his phone. A list appeared: off-book transactions, property liens, and transfers of ownership signatures. It wasn't just vandalism, it was fraud. Walter had been selling neighborhood property rights, using Evelyn's signature. Daniel's breath quickened. He took photos of everything, heart pounding, but as he turned to leave, a voice came from the doorway. Looking for something, Daniel? Walter stood there, umbrella in one hand, flashlight in the other. His expression was calm, too calm. You shouldn't be here, Walter said, stepping inside. Trespassing, stealing HOA property. You don't want to make this worse for yourself. Daniel straightened. You're behind this, aren't you? Evelyn framed me while you drained the HOA account. Walter chuckled softly. You really don't understand how things work here. Evelyn, she was unstable, but she was loyal. She took the fall willingly. Daniel's jaw tightened. You used her. I preserved her legacy. Walter said, and mine. This neighborhood was built on order. People like you, outsiders, destroy that. Daniel shook his head. You mean people who don't follow your control? Walter stepped closer. You could have just left quietly. Instead, you had to fight back. That's a mistake. Daniel's hand slipped into his pocket, quietly starting his phone's recorder. Then why send the email? He asked. Walter smirked. I didn't. Someone else did, probably that coward Lisa. She'll regret it soon enough. The air crackled with tension. Rain hammered the roof. Daniel took a slow step back. You're done, Walter. I've got proof of everything. Walter's eyes flickered to the open box. Then I suppose you won't mind if that disappears. He lunged forward, grabbing the metal case. Daniel shoved him back, the two struggling in the cramped space. The flashlight fell, flickering. A sharp crack echoed as Walter's shoulder hit the wall. Then silence. He groaned, clutching his side. You're making a mistake, boy. Daniel grabbed the case and ran into the rain. Back home, drenched and shaking, he plugged the drive into his laptop and began copying everything. Emails, receipts, transfers, all of it. When the download hit 98%, his power flickered. Then, black. He froze. The hum of his generator kicked in seconds later, but the screen stayed dark. Then his phone buzzed, another anonymous message. You shouldn't have opened that box. He stared at it, heartbeat pounding. The sender was untraceable again. And outside, headlights swept across his front lawn, a car stopping in the rain. Daniel reached for the curtain. The car door opened. Walter stepped out, soaked, limping, and furious. The storm had returned, violent, restless, like the neighborhood itself was trying to wash away its sins. Through the sheets of rain, Walter Green moved like a shadow, limping, drenched, his coat plastered to his frame. He gripped something in his right hand, hidden beneath the folds of his jacket. Inside, Daniel watched from behind the curtain, pulse thudding in his ears. His generator hummed faintly in the background, the only sound beside the rain hammering his roof. He had the proof now. The drive in his pocket held every fraudulent transfer, every falsified signature, every secret Evelyn and Walter had buried under Maplewood Lane. But none of that mattered if he didn't survive the night. The knock came hard, deliberate 3 times. "Daniel," Walter called out, his voice calm but brittle. "Let's talk like reasonable men." Daniel didn't move. His phone was recording again, hidden on the counter. Walter knocked once more. "You can't keep this up forever. You don't know who you're really fighting." Daniel took a breath, unlocked the door, and opened it just enough to face him. Rain splattered the floor between them. "You should leave, Walter," he said coldly. "Police have everything they need." Walter's expression didn't change. He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth behind it. "You think sending a few files will fix this? You have no idea what kind of people you've exposed." Daniel's grip on the doorknob tightened. "People like you." Walter leaned in slightly. "People who built this community, people who made sure it stayed controlled." He reached into his coat, and Daniel's stomach clenched. But instead of a weapon, Walter pulled out a flash drive. "Take it," he said. "You'll want to see what's on it before you make any mistakes." Daniel didn't move. "What's this supposed to be?" "Insurance," Walter said quietly. "Evelyn wasn't the only one involved in this, and she's not finished." Daniel frowned. "She's in jail." Walter's eyes glinted. "For now." He turned and walked back toward the street, rain blurring his silhouette until he was gone. Daniel hesitated, then shut the door and stared down at the drive. His instincts screamed trap, but curiosity won. He plugged it in. A folder appeared, Maplewood HOA Archives. Inside were scanned contracts, maps, and one video file labeled simply 4/17/23 Confession. He clicked play. The footage showed Evelyn sitting in her office months before everything happened. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. The camera angle looked hidden, maybe even set up by Walter. Evelyn's voice was trembling. "I can't do this anymore. He's changing the accounts, selling property rights. If I say anything, he'll ruin me. I thought the HOA was about community, but it's not. It's control." Daniel leaned forward, stunned. She tried to stop him. Evelyn looked directly at the camera. "He told me if I didn't take the blame, he'd destroy my husband's name. That's why I did it. That's why I blamed Daniel. I had to give them someone." Her voice cracked, and the video ended abruptly. Daniel sat back, the weight of her words sinking in. Evelyn hadn't started it, Walter had, and now he was cleaning house one person at a time. He picked up his phone, dialing Officer Trent's number. "Trent, it's Ray's. I've got something, a confession from Evelyn. It proves Walter's behind everything." Static crackled on the line, then Trent's voice slowed down. "Where are you?" "At home." "Stay there, lock the doors, we're sending a unit." Daniel hung up and grabbed the drive, packing. But outside, headlights returned, 2 cars this time, not police. One parked across the street, another a few houses down. He knew what that meant. 20 minutes later, thunder rolled again. A sharp knock rattled his door, not Walter this time, someone else. "Mr. Ray's." It was a woman's voice, familiar. Daniel's chest tightened. He opened the door a crack and froze. Evelyn Mercer stood there. No police escort, no handcuffs, her hair slicked from the rain, her face pale but composed. She smiled faintly. "You didn't really think I'd stay locked up forever, did you?" Daniel's voice barely worked. How are you out?" "Released on bail," she said. "Walter made sure of it. He doesn't like loose ends." She stepped inside, uninvited, dripping on the floor. "You've made a mess of things, Daniel. You weren't supposed to dig this deep." He stared at her. "You tried to destroy me." "I was protecting myself," she snapped, then quieter. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Daniel pointed toward the door. "Then tell me before he comes back." Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the window. "He won't come, not tonight. He sent others." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Others?" She nodded. "Walter, been running money for years. HOA funds, property flips, false permits, all to hide a development deal no one's supposed to know about. You stumbled into it when you moved here." "I just bought a house," Daniel said, bewildered. "And that house," Evelyn said softly, "sits on land Walter promised to another buyer, a buyer who doesn't exist. It's a shell company. You owning it ruins everything." Daniel's heart pounded, so he needed me gone. Yeah. Evelyn's gaze met his, we both did. Before Daniel could reply, glass shattered in the back room, the sound of a door forced open. Evelyn spun toward the hallway, they're here. Daniel grabbed his phone and whispered, Trent now, they're in my house. But the line was dead. Evelyn grabbed his arm, basement go. They ran down the stairs, the dim light flickering as footsteps echoed above. Two shadows moved through the living room, Walter's men. Daniel could hear them muttering, grab the drives, he's got the backups. In the basement, Evelyn's hands shook as she whispered, there's another way out, the storm hatch behind the shelves. Daniel pulled it open, the rain outside thundering harder. They crawled out into the mud, breathing hard. Evelyn's mascara ran in dark streaks across her face, but her eyes were burning with resolve. They'll find us, she said, we have to end this now. Daniel turned to her, then tell me everything. She hesitated, then finally broke. Walter forged development contracts years ago, my husband helped him. After he died, Walter used me to sign off on illegal land deals. When you bought the house, you exposed a gap in the records. He panicked. I became his scapegoat. I never meant to hurt you, but I couldn't let him destroy me too. Daniel's jaw tightened, then help me expose him. She nodded, trembling. The main server at the HOA office, everything's there. They moved through the storm together, slipping past the dark houses until the HOA office came into view, a small brick building near the community center. Evelyn unlocked the door with a hidden key. Inside, the air was thick with dust and secrets. Daniel booted up the desktop while Evelyn searched the cabinets. Within minutes, they found it, the drive labeled HOA Master Finance. Every illegal transaction was listed. But before they could move, a familiar voice came from the doorway. I told you both to stay out of this. Walter stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. His calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something sharper, unhinged. He raised a pistol, pointing it directly at Evelyn. You couldn't just keep quiet, he hissed. I gave you both chances. Evelyn's voice shook. You ruined everything, Walter. You used my husband, you used me. Walter smirked. Your husband knew what he was doing, you were just too proud to admit it. Daniel glanced toward the computer, the progress bar still copying files to the cloud. 73%, 74%. He needed time. Walter took a step closer. Give me the drives, Daniel, walk away and maybe I forget this happened. Daniel met his eyes. You don't forget anything. Evelyn suddenly lunged, grabbing Walter's arm. The gun fired, a deafening crack echoing through the office. Paper flew everywhere. Daniel dove behind the desk, yanking the power cord from the computer to pull the drive free. Evelyn screamed, struggling as Walter shoved her back. The gun clattered to the floor. Daniel grabbed it. Enough. Walter froze. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Evelyn was on her knees, gasping, a streak of blood on her arm. It's over, Walter, she whispered. The files are already online. Walter's eyes went wide. You. But before he could finish, the police burst through the door. Drop it, Officer Trent shouted. Walter raised his hands slowly, his world collapsing around him. The flash drives, the papers, Evelyn's confession, all of it out in the open. Trent moved toward Daniel, lowering the weapon from his shaking hands. It's okay, he said, it's over. Daniel turned toward Evelyn, but she was smiling faintly through her tears. You were right, she whispered, he needed to fall. Days later, the storm finally passed. News of Walter Green's arrest spread across town, charges of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Evelyn Mercer, though complicit, had provided enough evidence to earn leniency. Maplewood Lane was quiet again. The houses gleamed, but something had changed. The neighbors looked at one another differently now, wary, watchful, as if realizing the illusion of perfection could never return. Daniel stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the wet asphalt. A moving truck pulled up across the street. A new family, laughter, boxes, fresh hope. Evelyn's house remained empty. The for sale sign swayed gently in the breeze. His phone buzzed, a new message, unknown number. Thank you for finishing what I couldn't. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked toward the empty house. In the upstairs window, for just a heartbeat, he thought he saw a silhouette watching him, familiar, calm, almost proud. Then it was gone. Daniel smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Rest now, Evelyn, it's over." But deep down, he knew something else. In neighborhoods like Maplewood Lane, nothing ever truly ends. Because behind every perfect lawn, behind every HOA rule, there's always another secret waiting to surface.